Over on my Discord, I have a community of people who like to just hang out, chat, and yes, even complain about whatever their hearts desire, but it's also a community full of very creative and talented individuals, people that I really like to include in the creation process of my videos. I'm constantly taking suggestions or looking for feedback for my videos from them, and I really do enjoy including them on the channel. Over time, I've hosted several contests on that Discord, with the winners of those contests being featured here on the channel. And while those are usually creative writing contests, this month I decided that a change of pace was for the best, and we have gone for a custom card contest instead. As this was the first such contest being featured for the channel, I decided that it would be no holds barred, with contestants being able to submit any kind of card they desired with no restrictions, and they would be judged based purely on their creative merit and how balanced they seemed as a magic card. In this video, I'm going to be going over each of the entries for this contest, talking about their effects, their balance, and of course, their flavor. And at the end, a single one will be crowned the king of custom cards. With that out of the way, let's begin. Our first entry, submitted by user Judgment, is Baron, Grim Avenger, a Demir rewrite of the classic magic character. Baron Grim Avenger costs 1 generic mana, 2 blue mana, and a black mana. He's a 2/2 human wizard legend, and whenever he enters the battlefield, you choose 2 target creatures controlled by the same player. Their controller chooses and sacrifices one of them, and the other is returned to its owner's hand. At the beginning of your end step, if a permanent was put into a hand from the battlefield this turn, you return target creature card from your graveyard to your hand. Of course, this card also has flavor text. Urza refused to deliver comfort. Maybe he knew that no matter what he said, Baron would still suffer. This card takes one of the most tragic moments in Magic history, the moment where Baron finally pieces together how much of an inhumane monster Urza is, gripping with the death of his daughter, and turns it into a single creature effect. You could almost see this effect as how he is viewing the situation from a first-person perspective. Baron enters the battlefield, gets news of his beloved daughter's death, and finally parts ways with Urza. As Urza leaves, Baron digs up the corpse of his daughter, adding her to your hand. It's a very grim effect, fitting for the name, and it's a very sorrowful moment in Magic story history. Our next submission by Prue Gamer is a reimagining of a Magic character from Strixhaven, Dina, Soul Evoker, here shown as a planeswalker who costs 1 generic mana, 1 black mana, and a green mana. She enters the battlefield with 3 loyalties and has a static effect. Whenever you gain 1 or more life, you put a loyalty counter on Dina, Soul Evoker. For 0 loyalty, you create a 1/1 black and green pest creature token with, when this creature dies, you gain 1 life. If a creature died this turn, you may pay -1. If you do, create 2 tokens instead of 1, and for -X, each opponent loses X life and you gain X life. This card is an easy-to-understand reimagining of the original Dina Soul Steeper, turning her Soul Sister's effect into 2 separate but similarly impactful Planeswalker effects instead. Perhaps during the Phyrexian invasion, it's Dina rather than Quintorius who activates their Planeswalker Spark and travels across the multiverse. It's an interesting what-if. I do believe any of the main characters of the Strixhaven story would have made for a good entry to the Planeswalker roster, and Dina is one of the better ones. Her static effect combined with her negative X effect is a bit unbalanced, but overall this is a wonderful Soul Sisters Planeswalker card that I could very easily see being slotted into any Golgari deck that would like this effect. From user Niziag, we have a laddie called Jack, a human that costs 2 generic mana and 1 blue mana. He's a 2/3, and he has a very interesting set of effects. Sagas cost 1 less to cast, legendary creatures cost 1 more to cast, and a deck may have any number of cards named a laddie called Jack. The flavor text here reads, "This is a tale of a laddie called Jack, who was made of a herring's back. The start of many stories. It's very clear that this card was designed to cast as many sagas as possible while restricting everyone's ability to cast as many main characters for those sagas as possible. A deck having any number of cards named a Lady called Jack means that deck could in theory cast saga after saga after saga and never see a legendary creature hit the board. This is ideal anti-commander tech really if you think about it, but it's not legendary, so it itself can't be a commander. Still, I'm curious how many cards named a Lady called Jack you'd really want to include in your deck. After all, at what point does this effect really hit its peak? It's something to think about. And from user Sir Crypt, we have another Jack. Jack the Lantern, a legendary creature, pumpkin scarecrow that costs 3 generic mana, a black mana, and a red mana. It's a 3/4 with flanking and haste. When Jack the Lantern enters the battlefield or attacks, exile the top 5 cards of your library face down with a pumpkin counter and separate them into 5 different piles. Whenever you discard a card, choose the top card of a pile with a pumpkin counter at random. You may cast that card without paying its mana cost and put lands on the battlefield. If you don't, shuffle it back into that pile. Rakdos, especially the red part of Rakdos, has long been the color pair of chaos and minigames, and this effect creates one hell of a minigame, I'm gonna be honest. Creating 5 different piles you can cast from and then giving you the randomness of which one you're going to cast from means Jack the Lantern can have a very chaotic impact on a given game of Magic. Now, he seems a bit high costed, and the effects don't really seem to tie all that well with the concept of a Jack-o'-lantern, but needless to say, this is a very interesting and unique effect, not necessarily one I'm sure Wizards would make, but one that I think would really make for an interesting game of Commander. Next up, by generic, we have Kythin, Raven Guild Exile. A legendary creature, wizard mutant with 2 power and 3 toughness that costs 2 generic mana, a blue mana, and a black mana. Whenever a player discards a card, exile it. You may cast instant and sorcery cards exiled this way, and you may spend mana of any color to cast them. Other wizards you control are mutants in addition to their other types and gain 2 mana, tap, target player draws a card, then discards a card. According to Generic himself, this card was heavily inspired by the Odyssey and Onslaught effects, and it's very clear to see, especially with the whole Mutants Matter and allowing your other wizards to tap and do something to benefit Kythin himself. Now, this Dimir effect is one that I'm actually quite shocked Wizards has not given to a card already, allowing you to forcefully get rid of cards in your opponent's hand that you can then use for yourself is something we've seen on other cards. However, making it exclusive to instants and sorceries and giving you a specific way to get those cards out of your opponent's hand is not really something we've seen, even though it seems like such an intuitive effect. And before I move on, I don't have any idea when I'd have time to talk about this otherwise, so let's talk about the Raven Guild for a bit. The Raven Guild is this kind of loose association of criminals, mages, smugglers, and stabbers found in the city of Opheto on Otaria. The Raven Guild was kind of famous for its blue-skinned mutant wizards and for the fact that it was probably wrapped up into the Cabal when the Cabal really came into power in Opheto. There's your little bit of magic history for the day. Now, from user Yes the Man, we have Lord of Lightning, a creature, lizard wizard, that has 3 power, 3 toughness, and costs 3 red mana. Whenever you cast a red instant spell, you may counter it. If you do, Lord of Lightning deals 3 damage to any target. It also has a bit of flavor text. Lord of Lightning shifts his gaze, points his strong finger our way. Electricity escapes, leaves destruction in his wake. It's very obvious what's going on in this card, a 3/3 that turns any instant you cast into a lightning bolt for free. It's a very interesting effect and one that I could very easily see Wizards of the Coast printing for a standard set or perhaps a Commander precon. I really like the art going on here, showing this kind of strange, shadowy figure casting lightning bolts himself. although I really don't think the figure in the art matches the creature type, Lizard Wizard. It's a really interesting creature type combination there, Lizard Wizard. You really like to see it. Lizard Wizard, Lizard Wizard, Lizard Wizard. Now before my tongue gets completely tied, let's move on to Tien's submission, the Shaman's Familiar. A 2 power, 2 toughness wolf that costs 1 generic mana and a green mana. It's got a very simple effect. Red spells and blue spells you play cost 1 less to play. This is a very simple but also very flavorful effect. Shamans in Magic the Gathering tend to fall under the Temur colors, red, green, and blue. So this card allowing most shamans to be cast for cheaper is very effective, very flavorful. I don't have a whole lot more to add to this. I do like how the wolf himself is just kind of chilling in the art and the shaman is front and center. But yeah, it's a very simple effect, one that I could very easily see being printed in pretty much any Magic set. From Ross, we have the Primordial Beast, a legendary quest creature, changeling that has 0 power, 0 toughness, and costs 6 mana to cast. Any player may attack a quest creature. No player controls or may control a quest creature. When it dies, exile it and return it to the battlefield transformed under the control of the player who defeated it. When the Primordial Beast enters the battlefield, each player searches their library for a creature card and merges it with the Primordial Beast. Each player then shuffles their deck. A merged card has all abilities and characteristics of cards under it, and the combined power and toughness of each card. That was of course a doozy, but we're not done yet because, after all, this transforms into the Primordial Well. The Primordial Well is all colors, it has Shroud, and each land you control has tap, add 2 mana in any combination of colors. It's a legendary enchantment, and of course, it has flavor text. With the beast's dying breath, the Primordial Well flows once more. There is honestly a lot going on with this card, and it's clear Ross went all out in designing it. First off, there's a brand new mechanic in play here, the quest mechanic. No player controls this creature when it comes into play, and any can attack it, making it kind of like battles in a way, with your opponent and you doing the fighting instead of just one opponent. The Primordial Beast transforming into a land that benefits whoever managed to kill it is also a very interesting effect. Merged is also a brand new mechanic as far as I'm aware, and the Primordial Beast merging with a creature from each player's library means it has the potential to get really, really big. Although, since it's not controlled by anyone, any triggered or powerful effects that it might have underneath it aren't really all that impressive, at least not as impressive as the power toughness it would end up with. I'm not entirely sure how balanced this card is. After all, it flips into an enchantment that gives your lands quite the advantage. Tapping for 2 mana in any combination of colors is a disgustingly powerful effect. I'm not entirely sure, again, how balanced this really is, but if nothing else, it is a really impressive and creative effect on what is also a very interesting card to look at. This weird card border, I'm not sure where this is from. Is it from Card Conjurer? I'm not entirely sure. It's really neat to look at though. And finally, from Underworld Fox, we have Sabm Who Hates, a legendary creature, elf warlock with 3 power, 3 toughness, that costs a generic mana, a blue mana, and a black mana. She's got Death Touch, and whenever an ability of a permanent an opponent controls triggers, that ability's controller loses 2 life, and you gain 2 life. But the effect's not over. Whenever an opponent activates an ability of a non-land permanent, if it isn't a mana ability, that ability's controller loses 2 life, and you gain 2 life. Sabm is a legendary creature that very clearly wants your opponent to do nothing with permanents on the board, and instead just cast creatures and sling spells. These abilities might seem redundant, but together they cover the largest array of abilities that you could possibly see on the board. I'm not entirely sure how balanced this card is. Only 3 mana for such an oppressive effect doesn't really seem all that right. However, I'm also curious about why this has 3 power when it has Death Touch. In my experience, 3 power on Death Touch is completely pointless. After all, 1 hit from this thing will kill anything, regardless of what its power is at. Overall, this is a very unique Hate Bear in colors that don't really use Hate Bears a whole lot, and with a power toughness that doesn't match the Hate Bear design. Still, it's a neat card, one that I would really hate to be playing against. Now, before we talk about which of these cards is the winner, I felt like I should probably discuss for a bit what I find most interesting in a Magic card. As you may or may not know, I absolutely fucking love flavor. It is my absolute favorite part of the game. I love flavor text, but I also love when effects, art, power, toughness, name, and everything else combine to create a card that really feels like what you're trying to cast. When I'm summoning a big mammoth, how does that card illustrate that what I'm playing is a big mammoth? When I'm shooting a bolt of lightning at someone, how does that card illustrate that what I'm using is a bolt of lightning against my opponent? Flavor is a very important part of any card game, but Magic especially, since it's so built into not only the mechanics of the game, but the color pie those mechanics are reflected on. While flavor isn't always easy to reflect on cards, it's very easy to tell when you're looking at a card if it's flavorful or not. And for that reason, I have not one, but two winners of this contest. That's right, I couldn't choose just one. Ross's Primordial Beast is a very impressive and very creative card. The whole quest mechanic combined with the merged mechanic makes this one of the most unique cards I've ever seen, and one that I think could make for a very interesting kind of minigame in any game of EDH, where players are trying to race to take care of this creature so that they can gain the benefit of its flipped side. The other card, Tian's Shaman's Familiar, is also very impressive both flavorfully and mechanically. Yes, it's a simple card, but its simplicity is why I'm so surprised that it doesn't exist as a real card at all yet. I'm actually very shocked about this. This feels like the kind of effect that should have been printed maybe in Khans of Tarkir. So yeah, I lied. There's not one winner, there's two, but I loved so many of these entries that it was honestly hard even to narrow them down to two. But what do you think? Let me know in the comments below. Thank you so much for watching this video. Head on over to Discord if you want to partake in the next challenge, and I will see you next time.